Hey guys, what's going on? Today we're going to talk about building arrows. Alright guys, step one is to have somebody mark your arrow for you or determine how long you're going to cut it. There's two ways to do this. One, you can draw your bow, you can put a knock in your new arrows and draw your bow and have somebody take a Sharpie and mark right at the end of your riser, and that's where you can cut them. Or if you like to be safe, like I usually do, and put your broadheads way out in front of your fingers, you can cut it an inch past your draw length and it'll do that. So after you determine where you cut it, we'll go to the next step. Alrighty, so the next step is cutting your arrow. Now when I cut my arrows, I always cut carbon to carbon, which means I take that knockback out and I cut from the back end of the carbon to my mark. It's just what I think is the best way. Alrighty, so this is going to be a little difficult. You're going to have to bear with me here. And just adjust it so that you're cutting right on that mark. Alrighty, so once you got it set, tighten your arrow holder down back here. And you're good to go. Now something to understand when you cut this arrow is when you put that knock back in, most knocks are going to add about 1/8 of an inch of length forward once it's on your string. Not a big deal, but it is something to be wary of. Alrighty, so I'll go ahead and turn this on and cut these 3 arrows real quick. Now real quick, something to know, when you cut these, always make sure you rotate the arrow. Don't just push them into the saw, rotate the arrow. It keeps the cut even and it makes them easier to square up later. Alrighty, 3 cut. On to the next step. Alrighty, so now that you've got your ends squared, you're going to take your insert, you're going to slide it in your arrow. You're going to take a field point, you're going to screw the field point in, and then you're going to spin test it. So you can do that 2 ways. You can do it on an arrow spinner, which is not necessary, but it's not something I included, but you can get one. I'll put a link below. Or you can just take a flat hard surface and you can spin the arrow like that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that down here. Okay, so you'll be able to see wobble. And if it's wobbling at all, what you're going to do is you're going to rotate that. Until there's no wobble anymore. Alright, that's looking pretty good. So once you got it where there's no wobble, you take your Sharpie and you're just going to put a mark on the insert and your arrow up and down like this so you know how they match. You're going to go through and you're going to do that for all 3. Again, this is a little bit of a laborious process, so I'm not going to make you watch it. Alrighty, so now that you've spin tested them and you've matched your inserts up and marked them, now you're going to glue. Now for glues you have quite a few options. I've always done my best with like a 24-hour epoxy, but if you buy a 24-hour epoxy, make sure it's non-expanding. So like Gorilla Glue normally like bubbles up and expands. You do not want that here. You want a non-expanding epoxy. So 24-hour epoxies work great usually. Here lately I've been using Aerovane gel glue. It's from Fire Knock. It's used to install their shock caps when you install their lighted knocks. So that works well. I've also had really good luck with boning insert iron. So anything like that is going to work well. Now when you do this, the way I like to do it is I just pull the insert up and I put the glue on and I push it back down in there. And you do not need a lot of glue. Oh, okay, there we go. Didn't mean to push it down that quick. Alrighty, so then I spin it, push it down, and line those marks back up. Then I take a piece of paper towel, and I wipe off the excess. Alright, once you wipe off the excess, you set it to the side, and then like I said, I let it cure for 24 hours before I ever do anything else with it. Alrighty, so now you've done everything you need with your insert. It's time to get to fletching. I've got some 2-inch right wing feathers down here. They're naturally barred colored. This particular build is a high FOC build, so I'm trying to keep my weight up front high and my weight at the back low. So I'm going with feathers because they're light. These are 1.8 grains a piece. Also, I like the right wing and feathers in general because the surface area on the feathers imparts more friction in the air, which causes your arrow to rotate a little better. The key with feathers, though, is if you're going to do a right wing feather, you need to fletch it right offset or right helical or straight. You can't fletch it left helical or left offset if it's right wing. You need to match everything up, and that goes for your whole arrow. So if I'm using right wing feathers, I need a right offset or right helical fletching, and then I need to have a right offset or right bevel broadhead, or just a standard straight broadhead. And it's the same for left. You need to match left, left, and left. For this arrow build particularly, matter of fact, I have some right single bevel 175 grain steel forces, and I'll do a review on those at a later date. So, you want to prep the back end of your shaft where you're going to glue your fletching on. I've already done that. On all my shafts, I just use rubbing alcohol and make sure you let it air dry completely before you do anything else. So after you do that, you want to try to not touch the back end there. You want to slide your arrow into your fletching jig, and again, there's a lot of fletching jigs that work really well. I happen to like the Bitzenberger the most out of anything that I've tried. Then you're going to want to apply your glue. Now when you apply glue, you don't want to get crazy. Most of the time a very thin bead works. When you push that fletching down, it'll disperse the glue. So you just apply your glue here, and that's actually a little overboard really. Alrighty, and then the biggest reason I like the Bitzenberger is it's got really strong magnets and the clamp is heavy. So once I slide the clamp into place and push that fletching on, I don't have to worry about holding it down to continue to get that solid pressure. Once I push it down, it's on. With this tack glue, I usually give maybe 10 seconds at the max, probably less than that, honestly, before I go on to the other ones. You just kind of got to make sure you're not bumping around your arrow. Alrighty, so after I do that, I don't turn anything yet. This is important because I've screwed myself up. And I pull this up, and at the base of these veins, or these fletchings, sometimes you'll see there's excess glue. I just take a Q-tip and run it the length of the fletching. Now, to be honest with you, I'm not the prettiest fletcher in the world in both physical appearance and arrow appearance, but my fletching is functional. So, and if I were, it's for me. I don't really care. If I were building these for somebody else or for customers, much different story. I would make it look really nice and neat. But for myself, as long as it's functional, I don't really care. Then you just turn it and you repeat the process. Now, one thing I didn't cover, you have the option to do wraps. I have done wraps in the past. I don't have a problem with wraps. What I'm doing is checking to make sure those fletchings line up, and they do. I don't have a problem with wraps. I just, like I said, I'm building high FOC, so I didn't want any added weight on the back end here. The advantage of wraps are you don't have to worry about scraping your arrows off. If you're going to refletch, you just cut the wrap off and put another wrap on, and you're good to go. Alrighty, there's that. And again, just set it on and let it do its thing. Then one last rotation and one last fletching. There are other fletching options. I've seen people do 4 fletch, I've seen 6 fletch, I've seen people do offset veins where one's back here, one's up here, and one's up here. I've always just used 3 fletch, and every testing and every form of testing I've personally ever done, I've never seen any advantage to the 4-fletch or another weird fletching other than appearance. Now, I will say one advantage to maybe a 4-fletch would be you could use lower profile vanes and just more of them. And it would give you the same effect as using a higher profile or a longer vane. However, you're also adding more weight at the back end, so that's something to keep in mind. Alrighty, there it is, fletched up and ready to rock and roll. At this point, you're honestly done building your arrow. Since I didn't apply any wraps or anything, you would do the wraps before the fletching, by the way. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to rock and roll, screw my field points, my broadheads, and go shoot. So, well, there it is. There's really not a lot to building an arrow. There's a lot of small details you really have to pay attention to, but as far as actually building the arrow, it's not hard. It's just, again, attention to detail is really important. Making sure everything's set up right and you've got everything handy and ready to go, and you're letting things take its time and being patient with it. Like I told you before, these arrows are ready to rock and roll. Now, one little caveat to that, and something I tend to do, and it's really not necessary, but I tend to let the fletchings cure for 24 hours before I shoot them, just because it makes me feel better to make sure that glue is nice and set. There's a lot of fletching glues that cure quicker than that, an hour, 30 minutes, 5 minutes. I just feel better with it sitting 24 hours. So, as always guys, I appreciate you so much for watching, and we will catch you on the next one.